Hi everyone and welcome to this new class in this course in Aircraft Systems and Avionics. Today we'll be taking a bit further the description of the cockpit. So mostly commercial aircraft cockpits will actually look quite similar to each other. However, there might be some distinctions between aircraft which have been developed, designed and of course built in the United States, for instance, or those which have been developed in Europe. There might be actually quite significant differences, but mostly the structure of cockpits remain more or less the same, okay? And this is the structure that you will see in most commercial aircraft. Right, so the first thing that we notice, and probably the most important one, considering also the seats, for instance, is the instrumental panel, which is the panel that gives the information for flight, which is necessary or the most relevant information in order to keep the flight, right? So this has to be directed, just in front of the pilot in order for the pilot to quickly identify all of the information that he needs or she needs in order to fulfill the flight. Okay, right? So again, this gives the most relevant information in terms of flight. Then we have the central pedestal, which as I mentioned before, the purpose of this central pedestal might be a bit different depending on the type of aircraft, but mostly what we are doing is regulating the amount of thrust that we are giving to the aircraft, right, to the engines. And also we also have some additional configurations for the engines. And commonly, this is not for all cases, but commonly we also have all the radio frequency, the telecommunications to the ground, okay, to the tower, in order to keep all the information from the tower, from the airport to the aircraft constantly moving, right? In addition to that, we also have side consoles, which are located, as the name indicates, on the sides of the aircraft, right? And this is, this is basically composed by the joystick or the yoke, right, depending on the type of aircraft, but also by other radio frequency elements which might be used by either the pilot or the co-pilot, right? And finally, what we have is the overhead panel, which is located above. Okay, so these four main areas or topics, okay, not topics, but configuration. This is the main configuration of most aircraft cockpits, right? So in terms of the instrument panel, as I mentioned before, what we need is for the pilot to quickly access all of types of information which are related to the flight conditions, right? And so basically what we need is a combination of the 6 flight instruments that we mentioned in the first section of this course. And so what we have in one display, which is the primary flight display, is information regarding the 6 main flight instruments, right? So the altimeter you can find, I believe, the altimeter is this over here, okay, in which you can simply identify the altimeter at which you're flying. You have also the airspeed indicator over here on the left, right? The vertical speed indicator, which I believe is this one over here, which indicates the, as we mentioned in the first section, the change of rate of the velocity upwards or downwards of the aircraft. We also have the attitude indicator, the gyroscopic instrument, which is located in the center, right? The heading indicator, which allows us to have a bit of an information of where the aircraft is actually oriented to, right? And finally, we have the turn indicator, which can actually vary. The position can vary depending on the type of aircraft and the type of primary flight display. In this case, I believe this is the turn indicator, which allows us to know the angle at which we are turning the aircraft, right? Okay, so in terms of the central pedestal, as I mentioned before, what we have basically is quick information and quick controls of the engines. So as we mentioned in the electrical power units and many more, what we have is basically subsystem 1 and the engine 1, right? Engine 2 and also the auxiliary power unit. And we can quickly access the emergency stops in case of fire, for instance, or many more directly from here. And these are the thruster levers, okay? Also, just notice that this is an image. Of course, we have information regarding the ILS and the VOR, which are These are actually quite a bit external to this course, but are related to the navigation and telemetry, and basically how the pilot knows where the how to communicate back to the ground, and many more. Okay, it's actually related to landing, for instance, and many more. It's a bit of the how you actually tell the ground where you are at. Okay, so this would be the basic configuration of the navigation. It's actually quite complex, and I don't want to get too much into detail, but this is quite common that we find the ILS and VOR information over here. Okay, and in addition, as I said, it can actually vary from aircraft to aircraft, but it's quite common to have the radio frequency also, as you can see on this image over here, right? So this is mainly what we have with the central pedestal. Of course, it can vary quite a lot. I believe this is the configuration of the flaps, the angle at which the flaps are collocated, okay? And many more. So basically, it can actually vary from aircraft to aircraft. Right. So in terms of side consoles, again, it can be possible for the aircraft to have some instrumentation related to the radio frequency and navigation and so on. But commonly what we will have is basically this joystick, right? Or this type of steering wheel, okay, which we have over here. And the configuration of this part, of the side console can really vary from aircraft to aircraft. Commonly, European aircraft, you will see something like a joystick, which is using the fly-by-wire technology. And usually Americans use this kind of a yoke, right? Now I found this is a Douglas, an old aircraft. I think this is the DC-7, which has this particular looking yoke, right, which resembles a steering wheel. And as you can see, the configurations really can vary from aircraft to aircraft. The most important thing is that they have a digital accessible information, right, or either analog. And in this case, you can see the complexity of visualizing all of the different informations coming from the exterior of the aircraft in order to for the pilot to identify the best conditions, right? So it's actually quite interesting to know the complexity of these systems that were developed in the initial part of the aviation, right? And this is the overhead panel, and I wanted to make a bit of an exercise here. If you can actually identify some of the different elements that are here, right? Throughout this course, we've basically discussed what the hydraulic system looks like, what the pneumatic system looks like, and the electrical system looks like. And these are the main systems that are essential for flight operation. So it's actually quite easy to see, and if you have the opportunity to get inside of a cockpit, you will actually quickly identify that these are the indications of those systems, right? So on the overhead panel, we don't have, the pilot needs to look up, right, to identify all of this information. So this is information which is not that necessary when flying in order to, as to actually get this information quickly, but rather is information that is, of course, essential for flight, but that the pilot can actually move up his eyes or her eyes, right, in order to identify all of this information. What I mean by this is that it's not, you don't need to be quick when identifying this, but you need for the pilot to actually be able to identify all of the different components and, their state, right? So this is a basic idea of the hydraulic system. You can see it's engine 1, engine 2, APU. Maybe this image is not very clear, but you have the all of the different configuration, right? Also for the electrical system with the voltage, for instance, and again the engine 1, engine 2, and the APU and many more. And this is for the pneumatic system. Okay. In addition to that, you might also find again, this changes from aircraft to aircraft, but the anti-icing, for instance, technology, okay, and basically many more. So this would be a bit of the what you would see in an overhead panel, which, as I mentioned, can change. So this again is the image of the cockpit. You probably can quickly identify most of the elements now. Okay, we mentioned before, this is the main flight instruments, pressed or in conjunction in one screen, right? As we mentioned before, we have the overhead panel with all the information of the different systems and the thruster levers over here, right? So this is the basic overview of what you would see in any type of cockpit. Of course, many other different subsystems are important and essential in order to flight, but really the key ones are always the ones mentioned in this course. And this is why I think that this is a good way to finish this course, in order to have a real overview of how the pilot can control and distribute and manage the information coming from all of these subsystems, which are vital to the aircraft. Okay, so thanks a lot for your attention, and again, if you felt that this course complied with what you were looking for, I would really appreciate it if you can put a 5-star review, and also let me know if you have any doubts, if you have any, something that you would like to have a bit more information about. Okay, and I'll try to provide what you're looking for, right? So thanks again, and I hope to see you soon.